Welcome back to the Motivated Mind Zone. Glad to have you here. Today we are strapping in for a deep dive that looks past the curated feeds and straight into the messy, complicated, and often pretty financially risky decisions people make when they try to redesign their lives. We're calling this the price of paradise because, well, as our sources show, every major change seems to come with a painful, often really unexpected cost. Our sources today are just a phenomenal collection of candid confessions, interviews, and overheard narratives. They really reveal people's true feelings about where they live, what they aspire to, and the very real sacrifices, financial and emotional, they were willing to make for growth. Okay, let's unpack this immediately. What are the biggest things people are willing to give up? Not just money, but things like stable income, established safety nets, or even just daily convenience, just to feel like they are truly living the life they designed. We have incredible material today covering radical lifestyle swaps, critical city comparisons that kind of strip away the glossy travel brochures, and the surprisingly consistent role of inherited wealth and unavoidable debt in making these huge transformations happen.
What's fascinating here is the sheer diversity of frustration, right? It proves that unhappiness isn't exclusive to one geography or economic bracket. We aren't just looking at grand adventures jet setting across continents. We're also listening to the quiet anxiety in a small, supposedly peaceful town and the profound boredom felt in a place, that's considered a cultural center. By synthesizing these diverse short narratives, which range from structured interviews about business pivots to really raw conversations about marketplace bargaining, we get a surprisingly complete picture of modern aspirations. People are constantly measuring their lived experience against an ideal, and that gap, well, that's where all the psychological friction really begins.
Like that gap.
Our mission for you, the listener, is to extract the key underlying drivers of these life changes. Is it independence? Is it the perfect lighting on a sunny day in a romantic city? Or is it simply, the absence of traffic? We aim to truly learn what makes a city beautiful versus merely livable. The calculus of happiness is often counterintuitive, requiring massive sacrifices in one area to gain fulfillment in another, and the sources, well, they give us the exact blueprints of those trades.
Okay, let's start with the ultimate aspirational shift. The city exodus, trading comfort for character, I guess.
Yeah.
We have the decade-long story of Sandra Smith and her husband, who decided to trade good salaries and the established security of a warm house in the city for what they hoped would be the good life in a country cottage. And this wasn't a casual downshift. This was a deliberate, total financial sacrifice for a complete lifestyle overhaul.
And we really must dwell on that sacrifice for a moment, because the contrast between the idealized image of country living and the immediate reality is stark, especially in the early days. Sandra noted they have been living there for 10 years now, which is a long time. But the cottage didn't look anything like its current sort of polished state when they first arrived. She explicitly mentions it was very small and dark.
Wow. Small and dark. And then the most immediate, brutal reality check was physical, right? That first winter was described simply as absolutely freezing. We have to imagine what that actually entails, not just chilly fingers, but potentially broken pipes, inadequate heating, maybe high utility costs, eating into any savings they hoped for. That level of physical hardship, it challenges the romantic narrative immediately.
Absolutely. It paints such a clear picture of sacrifice. And the sources back this up with a description of a photo from that first year. Sandra and her husband are in filthy clothes, looking absolutely exhausted after a long day of hard work. They were physically grinding for this new life. It immediately dispels the myth of instant, easy, rural bliss. It suggests the first stage of the price of paradise is just pure, back-breaking labor.
Yeah, no kidding. And the journey to financial viability wasn't a direct route either, it sounds like. They didn't arrive with a business plan for apple juice. They started small, growing vegetables and selling them directly to friends and neighbors. The shift to apple juice was purely resource-driven. They switched because they had lots of apple trees that were readily available. This wasn't some grand market-driven strategy based on highest profit. It was a resource-driven necessity.
That's a crucial distinction. It really highlights the kind of opportunism required when you're attempting to bootstrap a life outside the traditional economy. 5 years later, they are still selling the juice at farmers markets. But here's the critical economic dilemma. While everyone says the product is delicious and high quality, Sandra admits that profit is extremely low because they feel they can't charge too much.
Why do you think they feel trapped by that price ceiling? Is it local competition, maybe, or a deep fear of alienating the very community they depend on for sales? Because, if you have a premium, delicious product, the basic business advice would be to raise prices until the market pushes back.
Well, it's likely a combination of factors the small-scale producers often face. They're competing against mass-produced, cheaper alternatives, for one. And the local customer base may not have the disposable income to constantly pay a premium. If they raise the price too much, they might lose volume, which they absolutely need to cover their fixed costs.
Right.
This means the sheer effort of the work, all that grinding, is never proportionally rewarded by profit margins.
And the resulting financial insecurity is very real, even a decade later. She openly states they still owe the bank a lot of money. That is the constant background noise of the rural dream, the lingering debt. Which leads us to a critical observation about these radical shifts. They often require external, non-earned support just to survive the startup phase.
This is perhaps the biggest takeaway from Sandra's narrative. The romantic idea of the complete bootstrap, totally self-sufficient life often relies on generational wealth or, familial sacrifice to cushion the fall. For them, that critical financial support came from two distinct major sources. Her parents invested some of their savings into the business, which is a huge familial sacrifice, and her husband also inherited money from his grandfather.
That's not just a buffer. That's basically the foundation upon which the entire venture was built, it sounds like. Without that initial capital injection, both the savings and the inheritance, it's highly likely that first freezing winter and the low profit margins would have been economically terminal. They might have been forced immediately back to the city grid.
Yeah, probably.
So, do we have to conclude that true lifestyle independence is often only accessible to those who already possess some foundational capital or familial safety nets?
The sources strongly suggest that. It really highlights the often unacknowledged privilege that enables the pursuit of a fantastic life. It mitigates the risk, fundamentally. You are exchanging salary for lifestyle, but you need a pool of money to absorb the inevitable losses during that transition period.
But despite the debt, the lack of expensive vacations, and the years of really hard work, Sandra's final verdict is overwhelmingly positive. She explicitly describes it as a fantastic life and is positive that her children have had a very happy childhood.
So we circle back to the worth it calculation. It clearly isn't about profit or net worth in her mind. They traded financial freedom and convenience for, well, environmental and experiential wealth, particularly for their children. The value proposition shifted entirely from their personal salary to their children's formative experiences and perceived quality of life. That, in this source, is the true non-monetary definition of success for them.
The ultimate price they paid was stability, maybe. But the return was measured in memories and generational well-being. A complex equation indeed. Very complex. All right, that rural picture is set. But what about the folks still in the cities and towns? Are they really any happier? Let's pivot now and look at the geometry of geography, contrasting two idealized European cities, Stockholm and Prague, with the visceral, daily frustrations expressed by people living in their current, often less glamorous hometowns. This section really reveals what we prioritize when we travel versus what we need to survive daily life. Big difference.
Yeah, the city comparison is fascinating because the criteria for selecting a favorite are deeply personal and specialized. We hear from someone who studied architecture in Stockholm, and while they acknowledge both Stockholm and Prague have interesting architecture, they specifically prefer Stockholm's because it has more beautiful, modern buildings.
That's a highly trained specific preference, isn't it? The appreciation of modern design coexisting with the historical fabric. It's not just about historical quaintness, it's about dynamic, ongoing architectural evolution. And Stockholm also wins on romance. But, critically, that is entirely subjective and linked to a personal milestone. The speaker says Stockholm, on a sunny winter's day, is probably the most romantic city. especially since she met her boyfriend there. The city itself is elevated by personal history. Makes sense.
Prague, however, dominates the social and experiential economy. When it comes to nightlife and the social scene, Prague wins handily. Fantastic music and bars are open very late. And perhaps most importantly for livability outside of work, the people in Prague are described as the friendliest the speaker has ever met, liking to go out and have fun. And the people in Stockholm, conversely, are seen as a bit less friendly or perhaps just quieter.
So Stockholm is the place for quiet, modern beauty and significant personal connection. It'd be enhanced by history. Prague is for high energy, social lubrication, and finding community easily. When people romanticize a city, they're really romanticizing the experience they had there, not necessarily the civic infrastructure.
That perfectly sets up the crucial contrast with the town critique survey. Because there, the conversation immediately shifts from romantic architecture and social connection to basic functional utility and safety. The survey reveals strong dissatisfaction with local towns, often citing issues related to safety, modernization, and convenience. The core components of a functioning life, really.
Let's break down these frustrations, because each one is like a window into a specific kind of failure. Take Andy. He moved to his town in 1990 when it was safe and established. Now he feels profound, daily anxious because there are too many frustrated young people. He believes the town is too dangerous, especially for older people. This isn't just a physical safety concern. It's a lament over community decay and a fundamental loss of perceived security over 3 decades.
This is a devastating critique. It suggests that the things we often rely on small towns for, stability, community, low crime, have eroded, leaving residents like Andy feeling kind of displaced in their own homes.
Yeah, unsettling. Then you have Rachel, dealing with the paradox of cultural preservation. She acknowledges her town is visually beautiful. It has a museum, an old church, traditional stores, plus a lovely market, all the tourist draws. But she finds it too boring for her. She views all those cultural assets as only interesting for tourists.
That's the classic tension, preservation versus personal stimulation. If the culture isn't dynamic, if it doesn't offer something new for the resident, its historical beauty functions merely as a static display. Rachel is measuring her town by its cultural output for her, the resident, not its aesthetic value for the tourist passing through.
Right. And David, at 18, is even blunter in his assessment of stagnation.
Yeah.
He wants a big, modern city. His current town has old buildings everywhere and is just modern enough. His critique extends beyond infrastructure. He critiques the local people for being as traditional as their parents. For him, a lack of physical modernity is directly linked to a stagnant social and cultural environment. The architecture is almost a metaphor for the mindset.
Exactly. For David, tradition equals constraint. He sees the physical structure of the town, the old buildings, as embodying the unwillingness of the people to embrace new ideas, trapping him in a cycle he desperately wants to escape.
And the critique gets even more specific with Jessica. She lives in a very small town, population about 350, famous for nothing, she says. She flips the script entirely. While many fantasize about the peace and quiet of a tiny village, she finds it isn't noisy enough for her. She desires nightlife or a shopping mall, somewhere noisy to go.
That's a profound need for sensory input, isn't it? Noise and crowding are often symptoms of cultural activity, consumerism, opportunity. Jessica is expressing a deep hunger for the cultural and economic energy that noise represents. Her town, by being silent, feels lifeless to her.
Finally, we have the most immediate and tangible frustration shared by James: traffic.
Yeah.
Getting to work is a nightmare. He states the average road speed is only 30 miles per hour due to crowding.
Oh.
He blames the lack of sufficient buses, which forces everyone to use cars, leading to time lost just sitting in traffic.
This is the perfect example of how poor municipal planning imposes an invisible tax on individual productivity and mental health. The geography of his town, combined with inadequate public investment, is actively stealing his time, reducing his personal quality of life every single day. He doesn't care about the beautiful old church. He cares that he lost 2 hours of his life sitting in the car this morning.
It's clear. When people are traveling, they prioritize romance and architecture, maybe social scenes. But when they are living, the priority shifts entirely to safety, stimulation, and most urgently, efficiency. They are measuring their happiness not by the presence of aesthetic beauty, but by the absence of anxiety and friction in their daily routine. We've seen how geography dictates frustration and how aspiration requires immense personal sacrifice. Now we pull on the financial threads that tie many of these disparate narratives together. As we saw with Sandra, major life changes often hinge not just on dedicated effort, but on unexpected capital, the timing and source of which are usually completely arbitrary. Inheritance consistently emerges as a significant, often critical, catalyst.
It really acts as the necessary spark for big leaps, allowing people to, well, democratize risk in a way. We already noted Sandra's business benefited substantially from her husband inheriting money from his grandfather, coupled with the investment from her parents' savings. That money didn't just mitigate risk, it likely funded the transition period entirely.
And it happens in other forms, too. Deborah mentions her friend Carla, whose grandmother died a few months ago and left her a house. Carla sold the house and is now investing the money specifically to pay for her tuition. Education, much like starting a niche business, is a major capital-intensive pursuit, and the inheritance allowed Carla to pursue that goal without crippling debt or reliance on traditional financing.
Yeah, that's huge. Deborah herself notes she once inherited a little money from a great uncle. Whether it's a small windfall that pays off a credit card or a major asset like a house, sudden, untaxed money provides critical momentum for self-improvement or stability. It's the ultimate unfair advantage, really, in the pursuit of aspiration.
Okay, so while generational wealth facilitates grand aspirations, the sources also highlight the daily economic dilemmas that rely entirely on personal interaction to solve. It illustrates the limits of modern financial convenience sometimes. Look at Nancy's situation. She is freezing while waiting for a bus that hasn't shown up. A failure of public infrastructure right there. And she can't even get a taxi because she lacks cash, and inconveniently, the ATM is broken.
That is a perfect storm of modern financial inconvenience and systemic vulnerability. The rigid digital payment system fails, public transport fails, and the cash access system fails her. Nancy is stranded because the infrastructure designed to support basic mobility and finance has collapsed around her simultaneously.
And the resolution is highly instructive. The modern technological solution failed her completely, forcing a reversion to a high-trust, low-tech interaction. Michael offers Nancy a ride and, critically, offers to lend her money. That moment of human connection substitutes for the failure of both the public transit and financial infrastructure.
It raises an important question for you, the listener. Is our society becoming so reliant on complex digital systems that we have reintroduced systemic fragility? Are we forcing ourselves back into reliance on spontaneous personal ethics just to get through the day? Nancy couldn't solve her problem through 3 different institutional channels. She solved it through basic human kindness.
Yeah, it's quite a story. This reliance on personal ethics contrasts sharply with the cutthroat world of market dynamics discussed in the same source material. We hear about the need for consumer savviness when shopping at markets. One shopper bought amazing boots and clearly loves the marketplace environment, viewing it as a place of discovery and maybe connection.
But the counterpoint comes from another shopper who bought DVDs and believes they were charged more than the movies usually cost new in the store. They were clearly penalized for their passivity or maybe just lack of negotiating skill. This highlights the inherent friction of non-fixed price environments. You are relying entirely on the seller's ethics or your own aggression.
And the advice given to the passive shopper is very telling. You're too nice. You need to be more aggressive like me. This highlights 2 completely conflicting shopping strategies. Are markets places for friendly interactions and unique finds, or are they battlegrounds where the sharpest negotiator wins?
The source material suggests that securing genuine value often requires a specific, aggressive personality type. Otherwise, you risk paying a hefty niceness tax on your purchases.
So we have generational wealth funding life-altering pivots, the critical need for £5 cash solved only by a random act of generosity, and the need for confrontational negotiation to secure a fair price on used DVDs.
The financial landscape revealed here is a messy blend of chance, systemic failure, and personal confrontation. Not neat at all.
Travel, as we know, is often pitched as the ultimate path to self-improvement and wisdom. But our sources reveal that major journeys and milestones are less about seeing sights and more about testing independence, stress-testing relationships, and forging memories that define personal maturity, for better or for worse.
Mark's story provides the quintessential example of travel as an independence milestone and a necessary mechanism for growth. He identifies leaving his job and going abroad for a year at age 25 as the most life-changing event. He frames it as a rite of passage, deliberately forcing himself out of his established comfort zone.
And the change he describes is profound and explicitly stated. Living in another culture opened my eyes. He believes he was a bit immature before, but is now much more independent and more open to other ideas. We can analyze this transformation, the forced necessity of navigating new languages, new bureaucratic systems, new social norms. It just accelerated his intellectual flexibility and practical maturity in a way his previous job clearly hadn't.
But not all journeys end in self-actualization. Some journeys expose fundamental incompatibilities, acting as a brutal relationship stress test. Lana's 2-week vacation to Kenya with her boyfriend was, by all accounts, an absolute disaster. It was planned perfectly on paper. 1 week in a beach hut on a beautiful sandy beach, 1 week on safari. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, the dream trip. But the problem wasn't the destination. It was the intense, inescapable proximity of the relationship tests.
Mm-hmm.
The atmosphere quickly turned sour. On the first night, at a party, her boyfriend immediately started flirting with another girl, talking to her all evening instead of dancing with Lana.
Ah.
Lana felt the atmosphere was romantic and magical, but not for me. The entire trip was immediately tainted. It transformed a planned escape into a scenario of, well, relational betrayal. They argued about everything afterwards.
And then comes the exquisite, cruel twist of fate that only happens in, like, cinematic nightmares. The girl from the party showed up on the safari bus.
No. Oh, my goodness.
I mean, the sheer misfortune of being trapped in that small space. Instead of a romantic, intended adventure, Lana was forced into a miserable week of camping and eating together with her boyfriend, the object of his attention. She felt sad and lonely, while her boyfriend clearly looked happy with the new girl.
It's emotional torture. Travel didn't solve their problems. It just amplified the fracture point and forced an immediate miserable reckoning. They were stuck on a safari bus, forced to maintain a facade of togetherness while dealing with the raw reality of betrayal. The outcome was inevitable, really.
Completely. They broke up upon returning to New York, and the boyfriend went immediately to Boston with the new girlfriend. Just like that.
Wow.
The lasting impact is psychological. Lana took lots of photos, but can't look at them now. Those photos, which should contain memories of Kenyan beauty, are now just painful artifacts of that betrayal. Her decision to return to Kenya on my own isn't about sightseeing. It's about necessary closure and reclaiming that geography and those memories for herself, transforming the scene of the trauma into a site of independence. Powerful stuff.
The contrast is clear. Travel simply shines a light on who you are, or maybe who you are together. If you are immature, travel forces growth, like with Mark. If your relationship is weak or flawed, travel can brutally break it, like with Lana.
Exactly. And finally, we see how memories are cataloged and prioritized through Kaylee's photo album timeline. Looking at her photos from ages 14 to 28 provides this really clean, chronological map of changing life priorities. It shows the shifting focus from group identity to personal luxury.
Yeah, it's fascinating. At age 14 in Italy, the focus is pure collective experience.
Yeah.
Skiing and sightseeing in Trento with classmates, standing downtown, holding hands and smiling. The memory is defined by the group dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
A year later, at 15 in Spain, the focus shifts to family bond. A vacation by plane, renting a car, swimming in the sea with her parents and sisters, perfect weather. The identity is defined by the family unit.
Then fast forward to age 24 in Australia. This is the Mark equivalent new independence. She was working in a cafe in Sydney, living with 2 English girls, spending free time surfing and swimming. The photo captures a new social life and self-sufficiency. Her identity is defined by her job and new social circle, independent of family or school.
Then there's a very distinct, raw, emotional transition captured at age 25.
The photo shows her crying as her brother's laughing, happy because he was going abroad to work. This marks a significant emotional milestone, acknowledging separation and the shift into fully independent adulthood for both siblings. Her tears reflect the realization that the primary family unit is fragmenting, changing.
And the timeline culminates at age 28 in Paris. This is pure adult indulgence and maybe status display. Shopping with her best friend, staying at a luxurious hotel, eating delicious food at expensive restaurants. The priority has shifted completely from group trips and family bonding to luxury, status, and targeted consumption with close chosen friend. The photos perfectly track the evolution from collective dependency to individualized, financially independent adulthood that values indulgence. Quite the journey mapped out there. Hashtag tag outro.
So, this deep dive has shown us the immense effort required for positive, fundamental change. You see Sandra's decade of hard work, Mark's determined maturity juxtaposed immediately with the simple, nagging reality of current life challenges. James's constant traffic, Rachel's crushing boredom, and Lana's painful relationship drama in a faraway land.
Yeah, the central tension here is absolutely defined by contrast and comparison. Every story we looked at, from the financial foundation required for the apple juice business to the frustration of a town that's too quiet, is a constant measurement between where the person is and where they want to be. People are relentlessly measuring their current circumstance against an ideal, whether that's Prague's friendly nightlife or the long-lost safety of a 1990s hometown they remember.
The key takeaway for you, the learner, is that happiness isn't a single metric. It's a delicate balance sheet involving financial reality, emotional connection, and geographic suitability. And often, achieving one requires the brutal abandonment of another.
So we leave you with this provocative thought. If you were forced to rate your own life changes and your town's flaws, like the people in the survey, would you prioritize financial stability gained through, say, an unexpected windfall? Or cultural richness like Prague's spontaneous social scene? Or simply the ability to avoid daily anxiety and sitting in traffic? Which factor is truly the hardest to live without, and what price are you currently paying for its absence?
Something vital to mull over until our next deep dive. Thank you for joining us.